You don't cry, you don't get excited. And when someone asks you how you're feeling, you say fine, because that's the only word that fits. But here's what I want you to know. You're not empty, you're not cold, you're not broken. What you're experiencing has a name, and it's more common than you might think. I'm curious, do you ever find yourself watching other people who seem to feel things so easily, who cry at films, who genuinely get excited about things and wonder, why don't I feel like that? What's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. Something was missing. I can't feel a thing. Hi, I'm Jill. I've been a psychotherapist for over 26 years, and I help people understand how their childhood experiences shape the way they feel, relate, and respond as adults. And today I want to talk about something that sits at the very centre of emotional neglect, but hardly ever gets named, and that is emotional numbness. Not the dramatic kind you see in films, the quieter kind, the kind where you go through your days feeling flat, where joy feels muted, sadness feels distant, and you've genuinely lost track of what you feel, if you feel anything at all. This isn't emptiness, this is disconnection. And once you understand where it comes from, you can begin gently to find your way back. Let me explain what I mean by emotional numbness, because it's not what most people think. When I say emotional numbness, I'm not talking about someone who's cold or unfeeling or who doesn't care about others. In fact, the people I've worked with who experience this are often deeply caring, sometimes too caring. They notice everyone else's feelings. They just can't seem to access their own. Emotional numbness is the experience of being disconnected from your own inner world. It might show up as not knowing what you feel, and when someone asks, you genuinely have no answer. Feeling that not sad, but not happy, just there, going through the motions. One client described it to me as sort of living in a band of grey, as if you're watching yourself from a distance, like you're observing your own life rather than living it. And here's the part that surprises people. You might be really good at describing emotions in theory. You can tell me intellectually that something was sad or frustrating or joyful, but you can't feel it in your body. The words are there, but the felt experience is not. There's a word for this, and it's actually alexithymia. And it comes from the Greek meaning without, lexis meaning words, and thymus meaning emotion. Without words for emotion. And it's not a disorder, it's a consequence. It's a consequence of growing up in an environment where emotions were never named, never mirrored, and never welcomed. Now, I don't want you to diagnose yourself or get caught up in clinical labels. That's not what this is about. But I do want you to hear this. If you grew up in a home where nobody asked how you were feeling, or where certain feelings were dismissed or shut down, you didn't learn to feel feelings, you learned to suppress them. And that's not the same thing as not having them. Now, here's where it gets tricky, and you need to stay with me because this might challenge how you think about your own story. Most people who experience emotional numbness don't grow up in obviously bad homes. There's often been no abuse, no violence, nobody was cruel, and yet something was missing. When I talk about childhood emotional neglect, I'm not talking about what happened. I'm talking about what didn't happen. Nobody asked you how you were feeling after a hard day at school. Nobody noticed when you were struggling. Nobody sat with you and said, "You seem sad. Do you want to talk about it?" Nobody mirrored your emotions back to you so you could learn what they were. And here's the thing about emotional neglect. It doesn't leave bruises. It leaves silence. And in that silence, a child learns something profound, something that shapes them for decades. What I feel doesn't matter. Maybe not consciously, maybe not in words, but the lesson gets absorbed into the nervous system. And over time, the child stops tuning into their feelings because no one else is tuning into them either. The feelings don't disappear, they just go underground, buried so deep that by the time the child is an adult, they honestly don't know what they feel anymore. And then someone says, "How are you?" And the only honest answer is, "I don't know." So what does this cost you? Oof, quite a lot, actually. When you can't name your feelings, you can't use them. And feelings aren't just decoration, they're information. They tell you what matters, what's wrong, what's right, what you need. If you can't feel sadness, you can't grieve. So loss stays stuck inside you, unprocessed. If you can't feel anger, you can't set boundaries. So people will walk over you and you don't even know why it bothers you. If you can't feel joy, you can't orient towards what lights you up. So you drift through life making decisions based on what you should do, not what you want. And if you can't feel anything at all, you can't really connect. Not really. Not with other people and not with yourself. This is the hidden cost of emotional numbness. It doesn't just take away the pain, it takes away the aliveness. And people who live like this for years, decades sometimes, start to feel like they're not really here. Like they're kind of watching their own life through a fogged up window. And nobody talks about this. Nobody tells you that not being able to feel, it isn't just your personality. It's a consequence of something that was missing. And that means, and I need you to hear this, it can be rebuilt. Let me pause here for a moment because you might recognize more of yourself in this than you've realized before. I want to tell you about a client. I'm going to call her Maya. Maya came into therapy in her early 30s. She was successful, capable, and well-liked. She told me something in our second session that revealed so much about her. She said, "Jill, I could tell you what I think about anything. My opinions, my analysis, my reasoning, that's all there. But if you ask me what I feel, it's just nothing. Silence. Like there's a room in me that's completely empty," which was such a fantastic way to describe it. And so I asked her, when you were growing up, did anyone ever ask you what you were feeling? And she stared at me for quite a time. And then she said quietly, "No, nobody did." Maya wasn't born without feelings. She was born into an environment where feelings didn't matter, or so she learned. And slowly, without knowing it, she was learning to stop feeling her feelings. And by the time I met her, she'd spent over 30 years disconnected from her own inner world. And here's the part that gives me hope, and I want it to give you hope too. Maya reconnected, not overnight, not dramatically, but gently, patiently, one feeling at a time. And the first step wasn't trying to feel something. The first step was simply noticing that she didn't. Because noticing the numbness, naming it, is already a feeling. It's the first crack in the wall. So what do we do? If this is ringing true for you, if you're sitting here thinking, Jill, that's me, where do I begin? I'm going to give you two very simple, very gentle places to start. They're not big, they're not dramatic, but I've seen them work over and over again. The first is a body check-in. 3 times a day, morning, lunchtime, evening. Pause for 30 seconds. Put your hand on your chest if that helps. Close your eyes and just ask yourself, what am I feeling in my body right now? Not what am I feeling emotionally, because that might still feel blank. Start with the body. Is there tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, heavy shoulders, a flutter somewhere? Don't try to name it. Don't try to fix it. Just notice it. Kind of like be a detective of your own experience. What this does, and this is the important bit, is it rebuilds the highway between your body and your brain. The highway has been closed for a long time. It takes a while to open it up, but every time you pause and notice, you're sending a small signal that says, I'm listening now. The second practice is even simpler, but don't underestimate it. Get a notebook and every evening write down one emotion, one word that you think might have been present that day. Just one. You don't even have to be sure about it. You don't have to feel it fully. Just guess at it at this stage. If you need help, here's a really simple list. Am I glad? Am I sad? Am I mad, as in angry? Am I scared? Am I ashamed? And just pick the closest one. If nothing fits, write down, I don't know. That counts too, because I don't know, said honestly, is more connected than saying fine automatically when you're not. Now, Maya did this, and the first week she wrote nothing. Every day, I feel nothing. But she kept going. And in the second week, she wrote, I think I was sad today, but I'm not sure. And in the third week, she wrote frustrated, definitely frustrated. And in a couple of months, she came into a session and she said, Jill, I feel something today, and I know what it is. Without having to think about it, I just knew it. That's reconnection. And it starts small, but it builds. Now, here's what I want you to take away from this video. You were not born disconnected from yourself. You learned, and for good reason, that what you felt didn't matter, that it was safer to go numb, that nobody was going to notice anyway. So you might as well stop noticing too. It's not a character flaw. That was intelligent adaptation to an environment where your emotional world wasn't mirrored back to you. And now, as an adult, you get to decide not whether you were affected, because you were, but whether you stay disconnected or whether you begin gently, patiently, one body sensation at a time to come back to yourself. You're not empty. You're not cold. You're not broken. You're disconnected. And reconnection is possible. I've seen it. I've lived it myself. And I want you to know it's possible for you as well. Thank you for spending this time with me today. These are some of the most important conversations I think we can have. And I'm so glad you were here for it. If something in this video resonated, I'd love to know in the comments, what's one thing you noticed in your body while you were watching? Sometimes just naming that is the first step back towards yourself. And I read every comment. I've also created a free guide called Understanding and Healing the Hidden Childhood Wounds. And that goes deeper into some of these ideas. So if you'd like some practical exercises or more practical exercises that you can start today, I'll put the link in the description. And the next time someone asks you, how are you? Maybe just pause and don't say fine automatically. Just notice, even if the answer is still, I don't know. That pause, that noticing, that's where it begins. And if you would like to go deeper and understand more about how your beginnings affect your life today, this video is a great next step. Bye-bye for now.